Hi, welcome to Stand and Deliver 2. This is Anne Wildman. I'm Director of Events for Gorton Community Center. And we're thrilled to bring the open mic to your living room once again. I'd like to turn it over to our host for this evening, Anne Purky. And she will be introducing the show and the tellers. So, Anne?
Hey everybody, it's Anne Purky. Welcome to Stand and Deliver Virtual the second time. So let's ditch this pandemic scene and be prepared for some laughs. Turn off the news, put down the newspaper, block it all out, and get ready for some laughs tonight. So anyway, I was going to start with a little ditty about some pandemic baking we've been doing in my house. We've gone overboard on this. I've been whipping out packages of Trader Joe's carrot muffins, Trader Joe's cornbread muffins. My daughter and my husband have been making American Revolutionary carrot muffins and pumpkin muffins. My family's kind of eccentric, but they've dressed up in tricorn hats and talked in British accents. We're weird. And we've been making scones and having high tea, British high tea. So, in the spirit of the pandemic baking, I decided I wanted to look up a Martha Stewart recipe for key lime pie. So I found one. It was incredibly yummy. It called for copious quantities of sour cream. And the main thing Martha Stewart kept saying is it's in the rind. So we grated and grated and grated. So we had this massive amount of rind. And my daughter, who is a very altruistic soul, very kind, said to me, Mom, why don't we call our minister and see who we could give key lime pies to? So we called the minister, and the minister said, indeed, we have some shut-ins, and we'd be glad for you to make and deliver some of these key lime pies. Thank you so much, the Purkies. So we made all these key lime pies. We got the list of the shut-ins, people that can't get out. We made the pies, we put them in the fridge, and one night at dinner, we're sitting there, and everyone looked at each other, and we wanted a key lime pie. So to make a long story short, we ate the 5 key lime pies for 5 nights, and none of the shut-ins got a pie. We never had to explain to the minister, we never called him back, but that was our key lime pie Martha Stewart experiment. And I just want to say, my whole household has experienced the pandemic 15 or 20 with this baking stuff. And I've heard this is common all over the globe, that people are whipping out baked goods, making them or soothing because of this. So I want to move on, and I want to introduce our first teller. I'm really excited. Sarah Bunger. I first heard Sarah at the first Truth Be Told, which is another Gorton series that we have. This was 4 years ago. It was our first Truth Be Told, and Sarah did an amazing piece about her father, and I believe that won the Moth Grand Slam, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Sarah from this great series that she does in Bucktown called Truth or Lie, that I've done a couple of times, where you have to guess if a story is true or a lie. And let me tell you, those lines are really blurred. You often cannot tell what is true and what is a lie. And it's a blast of a series. And there's free wine and beer. And so welcome to one of the greatest tellers in Chicago, Sarah Bunger. Take it away, Sarah.
Hi, friends. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Anne. That was a really nice introduction. I appreciate that. Pandemic stories. Let's get into it. My story actually begins today, which I did not think it would. But I'm on Facebook, and I'm scrolling, and my memories come up, and I see my most beloved picture of 2016, May 7th, 2016, and it's actually the day that I got engaged. So if you've ever been part of a proposal, you probably remember every moment of it. I do not. And the reason I don't is because my husband, in his inimitable fashion, woke me up from a nap in order to propose to me. So I have the grogginess of sleep mixed with, if we're being honest, I didn't think he was ever going to do it. And I was totally taken aback. And so instead of saying, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, like you see on television, I said for at least 20 seconds straight, is this fucking happening? Is this really fucking happening? Is this fucking happening? What the fuck is happening? And then eventually he takes my hand and he says, it's really fucking happening, babe. And we're forever. And so thus begins our story. And 2.5 years later, we get married. And the reason we didn't get married right away is because weddings are very expensive, and weddings in Chicago are very, very expensive. So we get married in this beautiful winter wedding in a bar, which is very on brand for us. And our favors were actually koozies that say, I went to Vincent and Sarah's wedding and all I got was this koozie, which we thought was really funny. And I hope you do too. When you're planning a wedding, you're often planning a honeymoon. And we did not have the emotional bandwidth or the finances to do both at the same time. So we decided to get married, and then after that, we'll think about the honeymoon, which was the best decision we ever made, or so I thought. So I'm guessing that honeymoons, way back in the day, were for the purposes of just like straight baby making. And I think they probably evolved into, like, this is the one time in your life where you can really connect and be with each other, because I bet life is just going to come at you and you're going to make different decisions about money. You're going to put it in the house, you're going to put it into other things. So do this special thing for you now. So we sit and we plan the ultimate honeymoon. And the ultimate honeymoon for me, and which I eventually talked him into, was just something tropical and something with unlimited alcohol. Like, I just wanted to be half in the bag for like 5 days straight. I wanted to be in a lounge chair, and I wanted somebody to bring me a pina colada or 10 whenever I wanted. Or I could do like a swim up bar and then sit on a bar stool and get my pina colada or 10 that way. We look at Tahiti, we look at Bora Bora, we look at all of these places, and we land on Mexico because we got this great deal in which we had something called a junior swim out suite. We literally could go from our bed to, fancy word, lanai, and then like go down the steps into the pool and swim to the swim up bar. The swim up bar was very exciting to me. I cannot overstate that. So we have it all planned out, and we buy the tickets, and we even get a great deal, and we get first class tickets, which I think it's actually business class, but we don't know the difference because we're middle class, but we're stoked about it. And we book it for March 26th to the 31st of 2020. And on March 12th, my school calls me and says, we're not meeting as a school anymore, we're doing remote learning. And on March 16th, all of the bars and restaurants are closed, and the NBA isn't playing anymore. And Lori Lightfoot closes down the 606 and is just like a specter everywhere watching us. And I agree with all of these measures because we need to be safe. But we were really bummed that we missed this honeymoon. There was just no way we could go. If we did get stuck there, we wouldn't be able to get back and see our family. So regretfully, we cancel it. We did have trip insurance. And we decided to make the most of it. We're like, from March 26th to the 31st, or however long this pandemic lasts, we're just going to like have our honeymoon. It's just going to be a stay-at-home honeymoon, right? Because what do you do on a honeymoon anyway? You just spend tons of time together. So we're really like accepting an attitude of gratitude about this. And we're just going to spend all this time together. And it has been like iffy, right? It's tough. It's real tough. So instead of being in warm and sunny Mexico, we are locked at least 1 hour of every day in a cold war with each other. And it's usually about who's going to take out the goddamn trash or unload the fucking dishwasher. Those are our major wars right now. We lock eyes, and without breaking eye contact, I will shove more trash down so the lid can close. And he, without breaking eye contact, will reach into the takeout drawer and get a plastic fork so that he doesn't have to get a clean one from the dishwasher. And this is our little dance. It's a war of attrition. Somebody will lose, but we're playing it every day. And instead of being like at night on a beach with like the waves crashing and this balmy air, we're kind of cold and chilly all the time because it's Chicago. But I'll say this, 23 hours of every day are pretty good. We have coffee in the morning together and we talk about our days, which is not dissimilar from the previous day, but we never had a chance to do that before. We take a long walk every day. We are now gardening in the back, and that's a whole new reason to disagree with each other about something. So we've got that going for us. And every once in a while, about every 5 days or so, I will have a mini panic attack because I don't know when this pandemic will end and I don't know if we're going to get sick. And I will say, is this fucking happening? Is this really fucking happening? Is this fucking happening? What the fuck is happening? And he will take my hand and he'll say, babe, it's totally fucking happening, but it's not forever. We're forever. Thank you.
Sarah Bunger. Joy in the pen. That was excellent. And raising your, what is it called again? I don't remember. Your wedding cup. Okay. All right, that was excellent. Okay, our next teller did Stand and Deliver in February. He did an excellent story. He regaled everyone. There was a lot of laughter, and we're so glad to have him back. I look forward to his story. Everyone welcome John Costas.
Well, thank you. Hey, I don't know how many of you folks were around during the 1960s. If you were, one of the things you will remember, or at least will have read about, is rocket launches and space travel. I remember when I was a kid, I would be just mesmerized by rocket launches. To see the countdown, I'd wake up early to find out it was T-minus whatever and counting. And, you know, I would watch the countdown as long as I could until I had to go to school. And then sometimes if I was really lucky, would relent and she'd let somebody bring in the television and we could all watch the rocket launch in class. And it was unbelievable watching them count down, to hear them get down to T-2 and you would see the rocket ignite and you'd see this huge billow of smoke. And then at liftoff, you would see this 10-story building just take off into the air. And everybody would be mesmerized and they'd all be excited, particularly about the fact that this was a lot more fun than doing the schoolwork that we could have been doing. Well, fast forward about 30 years, and I find myself working for a very small company that made devices that measured the stresses and strains of anything that moved. To give you an idea of how small the company was, I was the 5th full-time employee. And it was run by 3 PhD geniuses, and you know, I had my little corner. And one of the things I did was handle problems for customers that nobody else seemed to want. And we had a lot of really interesting problems because it was kind of an informal competition among our customers to see who could torture our measurement instrument enough, or put it in the most torturous situation without actually breaking it. One customer put it on a tank of or on the tread of a tank. And this means when the tank was moving at full speed, the recorder went from 0 miles an hour when it was on the bottom of the tread, and then instantly at 60 miles an hour. And it did this again and again for hours, and it didn't break. Well, another customer, not to be outdone, decided to put it into a crash dummy. You know, these crash dummies that you that ride in vehicles and you smash into brick walls to measure the impact on a human skull. Well, that was it. Well, because of its durability, NASA got wind of this product, and they wanted to buy a bunch. And they got the idea, well, we bought enough stuff that we want somebody from the company to tell us how to use it. And that's where I fit in. The people who own the company unchained me from my desk, and I got to go down to the Manned Spacecraft Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Now, if you've never been there, it's on a military base. So you go through, military security, and you pass all these very imposing structures that are meant to test rockets. And, they're big, they're office buildings. And you get the idea that building rockets is not the kind of thing that you do in your garage with your spare time. Well, then I was ushered into I saw a bunch of buildings that looked like the headquarters, and I was walked by a statue of Werner von Braun. I thought, oh wow, this is where he worked. And I was further ushered into this very large conference room that had a very imposing door with a padlock on it. And I thought to myself, wow, this is where it happened. This is where Werner made his decisions. This is where, they planned moon missions. Well, I was all very impressed with myself as I began my presentation, being introduced to all the dignitaries at NASA, as I was explaining how the equipment worked. And then, while I was in the middle of my presentation, I said to myself, here I was talking to the head of the solid rocket booster program. I have arrived. All these dignitaries are here to hear me talk. And while I was thinking of that, and as I was going on in my presentation, I looked over and I saw, wow, there is the head of the solid rocket booster program sleeping through my presentation. Well, at any rate, I'll leave you with this. If you have a rocket scientist ego that, like I did, you well may find they'll be brought back down to earth in no time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I didn't mention this, but we put a shout out to get some tellers from Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. We wanted to see who in the community would do an open mic. And unfortunately, we didn't really get any response, but we got John and we got Karen, which was excellent. The two of them responded, and everyone else on the program tonight, I asked because I've seen them tell before. But John and Karen, thanks for responding to the open mic. I really appreciate it. So our next teller is Jeff Baltus. I saw Jeff do this story at Cocoon, which is a storytelling series on Fridays at 11 a.m. And I love the story. And John runs the Andersonville Do Not Submit, which is held, I'm not sure what Tuesday of the month.
It's the last Wednesday of every month when months happen.
Okay. And Jeff is an event festival manager, and that has something to do with his story. So take it away, Jeff.
Thank you. So I grew up in a small town in rural Ohio in a very unique family business. Versailles, Ohio, population 2,000, home of the best French restaurant in 3 counties, the Inn at Versailles at Versailles. We're probably most famous as the birthplace of Annie Oakley, subject of the musical Annie Get Your Gun. The first lines out of Annie's mouth, "Folks are dumb where I come from." She's a tremendous point of pride in our community. Our district is also the one who elected John Boehner to Congress for 25 years. So somehow in the middle of all of that was my family business. And for 3 decades, we were the largest supplier of political campaign goods in the country. So if anyone got a John Kerry bumper sticker in 2004, that was us. If you got any Hopi Changey stuff in 2008, that came through our warehouse. If anyone has a Make America Great Again hat, we had nothing to do with that. So we're in the middle of a very red district, and we're cranking out swag for all of the liberal elites. And one of the coolest things about growing up in this company was the opportunity it provided for us to see the country outside of Darke County. So setting up booths and selling buttons at conventions and rallies turned into family road trips with super cheap labor, horribly disguised as vacations. But for us, it was fun. And I was exposed to philosophies and attitudes of the rest of the country, and I could engage with people and get a perspective different from the cultural isolation of Versailles. So whether or not I agreed with a particular side, I could understand how the factors in their life drove them to a specific philosophy. It was like, so my entire childhood was an eye-opener. And these events put me at a sort of not quite behind the scenes spot at some really historical events. I was in the room when Obama gave his keynote address at the '04 Democratic Convention. I was 8 years old, running around with VIP passes at Clinton's inaugural. We got better parking spots than some of the politicians sometimes. And these events also put me in a sort of one night seems to be a bit more historically significant than the rest. My sophomore year of high school, I was pulled out of class for a few days to go work on an outdoor event in Nashville. And we had a couple of truckloads of buttons, and we were driving through the hills of Kentucky overnight. And as we drove along with our "Proud to be a Democrat" bumper sticker, suddenly the back windshield shattered. Rain started pouring in on the merchandise. We tried to find an exit with an open gas station. We had to put our thank you bags over the windshield to patch everything up. To this day, we don't know exactly what happened. It was probably an air pressure change, but it was also like definitely someone shooting at us. So the next day, we take our car to a fix-it shop and fix up what was in no way a bad omen. And we set up a booth across from the Tennessee War Memorial. And it had these huge banners that are still burned into my brain between all of the columns. Everything was just decked out in red, white, and blue. And these guys were going all out because election night 2000 was going to be a huge party for the Al Gore campaign. Everything started before the polls closed. There were speeches made by the VP's friends and celebrity supporters, including Bernadette Peters, straight from her Broadway revival of Annie, Get Your Gun, singing, "Anything Bush can do, Gore can do better." At least she cut it off there. So we take for granted a lot of the technology that's so commonplace in elections now. This was 20 years ago. So there weren't any portable jumbotrons on either side of the screen or on either side of the stage. Cell phones weren't exactly everywhere yet. People weren't texting. So the updates would spread through the crowd from the few people who did have cell phones. And there were like a couple of TVs on either side of the plaza with CNN on, but other than that, CNN was waiting on the same stage that we were. So at 8 p.m., Florida was called for Gore, and everyone went crazy. And then the rumors started. At 10 p.m., Florida was taken away from Gore. So things were going a little longer than expected. And as time dragged on, no one knew what to make of anything. Like, Gore had called Bush to concede, and the crowd just deflated. And then he wasn't taking the stage, though. So more rumors started going. He called Bush to take it back. No, he hadn't. Yes, he had. We won. We lost. News from the few TV stations weren't any help because we're watching the same thing. The organizers didn't know what to do because they hadn't planned on this much dead time. So everyone's there, frustrated and restless. It just somebody do something. So in a desperation move, because my home state of Ohio had been called for Bush, they pushed Bernadette Peters back on stage singing, "Folks are dumb where I come." Shut the fuck up, Annie Oakley. This is not the right time. We were exhausted. And there were so many up and down emotions through the night, and people stopped buying things around 1 a.m. The updates stopped, and there was no use at staying out at that point. So we just went back to our hotel thinking, well, the next morning we'll wake up and there'll be a new president. A month later, after recounts and hanging chads in Florida, the George W. Bush administration started. We've never been to another election night since.
Thanks, Jeff. You can tell why you're an event planner, I guess. A lot of family vacations disguised as labor. A lot of labor disguised as family vacations.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
I mean, we got to go to the Grand Canyon doing, conventions in Las Vegas, so.
What an excellent upbringing. Novel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, moving right along, we have Karen Evans. Karen responded to the open mic, and in her bio that she gave me, it said you've done 10 curated shows, Karen, and you wanted to do the Moth, but you've never been to the Moth yet. So there's always opportunity to do that, because it's held in Chicago all the time. So ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Karen Evans.
Oh. Karen, will you unmute, please?
Hi. I used to record mixtapes on my Pioneer SX780 analog stereo from 1980 on. I tried to make cassette tapes reflect the full range of my emotions, even the soft, feminine emotions that I felt required to hide in most instances. I liked hard rocking tunes, girl tunes like Barracuda, and soft nurturing harmonies from Crosby, Stills, and Nash, instrumentals, and playful tunes in my mixes. I myself was a complicated mixtape of a person, trying to hide my own soft nurturing melodies that I felt deeply from everyone. The world only saw the hardened rock that I thought I needed to pretend was me. Softness equaled weakness in the world I was taught, the world I was growing up in. The confusion in my mind and feeling vilified for being different, not able to fit in anywhere, and not able to be my true self with any kind of company was a constant. Going deep within myself made me see the mixtape in my soul for what it was. A natural state for some humans, it stopped the overwhelming confusion in my mind. It was then clear to me that I was transgender, if I knew that word, or a crossdresser in the closest vernacular of that time. I was only attracted to women, and there was a goddess living next door, always on my mind. But I digress. Getting back to my awakening, it had no effect on anyone else. So my plan was to hide my secret until I felt safe enough to share with another. Only those who have experienced these feelings can know the true depth of losing one's own individual identity and not living authentically. When we supposedly live in a free society and are given free will, why do some people insist on trying to punish others for expressing a different free will that harms no one? So it was a scorching hot and sunny July Sunday when my neighbor, Mrs. M, asked if we could all go to church together. Us 7 kids and our moms, something we had never done before. The mixtape in my head started playing on fast forward. My female identity sitting dormant, my preference for female attire, and my crippling attraction to Mrs. M was enough to do me in. Add to that the testosterone surging, and it was more than I could possibly process. So what did I do? Before getting in the car, I ran down to the basement and smoked a large chunk of hash underneath a glass. Lighted on a pin. A feeling of calm came over me. My mixtape slowed to normal. I was ready to get through church now. 10 minutes later, we were sweating in the pew in the overcrowded, overheated church. Another 10 minutes went by, and I was daydreaming, trying to keep my mind off of Mrs. M sitting right next to me. My stomach felt bloated now, and I really had to burp. I knew the tremendous danger and resisted. for as long as possible. Then a little burp got out with smoke curling up. I tried to inhale the second burp for as long as possible and direct it up and away. I felt like a fire-breathing demon now in the sixth row. I didn't feel judged by Jesus staring down at me from the cross, but I felt daggers coming out of my mother's eyes from her reddening face. I had to inhale the next large, unapproved incense release and held it in far too long. Before I knew it, I had passed out and fallen sideways, ending up with my head in Mrs. M's lap. I woke up and thought I was in a dream until a very large man seated behind us lifted me up and carried me out swiftly like a small child, less the screaming. He demanded someone call an ambulance several times. It took me some time to convince those gathered in the lobby that an ambulance was not needed. I would be fine. I passed out from the heat, I repeated, soaking in sweat until someone agreed. I knew physically I was fine, but my gender wasn't okay for me. I got out of church early that day at least, and my neighbor vowed to never go with us again. I knew I was different, not exactly why or how yet, but I did have the perception of what doctors and counselors know now, that it is a prevalent condition of the human population. Not a mental illness or a moral question. It's just the way some of us are created for the betterment of all, if that's how we choose to see it instead of fear. I learned that I needed to listen to my own mixtape, find and hold on to my true self. And as I listen, celebrate softness with almighty strength. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. So appreciative of that story. Thank you
Anne.
so much. Okay, our next teller is a personal friend of mine, Paul Trainor, father of 5, storyteller extraordinaire, Wilmette revolutionary, an all-around good guy who I had the pleasure of telling a story with at Ragdale last summer. Please help me welcome Paul Trainor.
Thanks, Anne. Wilmette revolutionary sounds like the ultimate oxymoron. But anyway, so glad to be with all of you tonight. This has been great. And my apologies up front to all of you listening, because there is no way to share the story without it becoming indelicate. So we've all been living through the same metaphorical shitstorm in recent weeks, of course. But on Good Friday, that shitstorm was made incarnate and came to dwell among us here at the Trainor household. So one thing you need to know about me is that I am a happy, lucky husband, and my wife and I have 5 children. I know for a fact, out of personal experience, that there's nothing in the world worse than being alone. But I can tell you right now, it sounds great to me. With 5 kids, 3 of them teenagers, my wife and I, after 2 months, clogged toilets have become about as common in our house as the sounds of video games, ostentatious sobbing, and the fridge door opening. So I'm suspicious when they don't get clogged up. But on Good Friday afternoon, one of the toilets clogged up, and this was different because I began to plunge at it, and then I realized that another toilet on the second floor was clogged up as well. That's when I got scared, and as I continued to try to plunge the first toilet, I could suddenly smell rising behind me in the shower, like a vent opening in the bowels of hell, what they call brown water, which is a euphemism that I will not explain what it is for, because it's one of those rare things where brown water, the euphemism sounds almost as bad as the actual thing, almost. Anyway, I knew we were in big trouble, and had it been any time, before 5 p.m. on a weekday, I would have run right to the phone without hesitation to call a plumber. But I was a little concerned because, Murphy's Law. I knew now we were looking at rate and a half or double rate to call in the cavalry on this day of Calvary. Thank you very much. It's a Good Friday joke. But you know, what can I do? For several weeks, we've been holding our own against the global apocalypse. But this was now local, and it was a bridge too far. So I don't know about you. I have a very specific system when I procure home service professionals. I log on to Angie's List. I tell them my problem. I submit my details so professionals can contact me. And then I become impatient 5 seconds later, and I call the first emergency service I find listed on Google. And so they told me I was lucky because they had a dispatcher who just finished the job in Palatine, which also sounds biblical, but really isn't. And so they could be over in 20 minutes. So I began to ask them about their procedures for the coronavirus and keeping people safe in this time of COVID-19. We've been sheltering in place for a month, and all 7 of us were still healthy, thank God. My 5-year-old up to my wife and I. And as soon as the dispatcher started telling me his procedures, I said, you know what? I don't care. Just send him over. Whatever. It's fine. It's totally fine. So about 20 minutes later, yes, they did in fact arrive. There's a younger guy and an older guy. The older guy was very chatty and amiable and had no mask on. Neither did the younger guy. I met them at the doorway to check him out. And I mentioned it to him. The younger guy went back and got one and was fine. The older guy just kind of ignored the whole thing and wandered into the house with me and stood chatting in the doorway of my house in the front room for about 5 minutes. It was a soliloquy, I guess not unlike one of these monologues here at Gorton. But he was telling me that they'd been in houses all week long for the last 2 weeks, up at 5 a.m., gone to midnight every night. Everyone's home. Everyone's together. You can imagine all these people using all these toilets all the time is just too much to bear, and so they had been busy all the time. So I'm sitting here thinking, counting up, like, okay, I'm going to take 2 calls, a call every 2 hours. How many people has this guy been around that's now talking loudly in my front entryway with no mask on? So I mentioned it to him, and he did go out to get, he said, oh, I have something in my car. He said something, of course. And when he came back in, I knew because it was like a rag that he was holding, and, you know, he was very pleased that he had it. I could see his smile around the edges of it as he held it, and he was carrying, you know, one of his pieces of equipment on his shoulder. And I realized, you know, look, so you can't really plumb like this. I'm not a plumbing expert, but my hunch is this is going away as soon as he goes upstairs. But, you know, for my own sanity and for social distancing, I didn't go anywhere near it. So these guys were upstairs for, oh gosh, probably an hour, which was scary, first of all. The old younger guy had come down after a couple of minutes and said, you know what, I think we're going to be able to, it's between the first and second floor. I think we'll be able to root it out. So it only should take a couple of minutes, but it should be pretty easy. And this like freaked me out because I don't know if you guys have this experience, but it's like when someone tells you, oh, I just want to tell you a quick story. And, you know, like, okay, I might as well pull up a chair because this is going to be a while. Well, after an hour or so, it was banging and clanging. My 12-year-old was weeping in one room because she was afraid we were all going to die of coronavirus now. They finally came down and said, look, we weren't able to get it. There must be something in the basement. And I realized that, like, they've been, you know, breathing heavily and heaving in 2 bathrooms, the master bedroom, and the hallway, you know, for the last hour plus. So anyway, they went down to the basement. They found what was called the clean out. You know, there's one of these big tubes where is your main sewer line, and there's a clean out for some reason right into the side of this thing. You know, you'd think it would like kind of come up and like, you know, there would be some gravity benefit, but no, it was on the side. So the guy said, all right, well, I can go ahead and open this up and see if I can clean it out from down here, you know, but, you know, it's going to be a bit messy. And I thought, ooh, and he said, in fact, you want to clear things out, you know, in about a 10-foot radius. And like an idiot, I said, oh, just like social distancing, before I realized what, in fact, this radius was to protect from. So I very quickly moved it all out and was freaking out about all of this and didn't want to, you know, be anywhere near it. And he said, do you have like a plastic bag or something so I can try to catch stuff as it comes out into a bucket? You have the bucket? And I'm like, these guys are plumbing professionals. You want a plastic bag to catch the human waste pouring out of this pipe in my basement? You don't have any other system in place? And I was really pretty, you know, tense at this point. I was very stressed out, and I snapped at him. I'm like, are you kidding me? A plastic bag? I said, you don't have a tool for this? And he said, tell you what, you invent one and we'll split the profits. And I realized, you know what, we both were under a lot of pressure and stress, but only one of us was about to, you know, facing a torrent of shit literally within the next 5 or 10 minutes. So I made my apologies, cleared out the area, and got upstairs. So it took a little while longer. They came up. This whole ordeal took probably almost 2 hours. They'd gotten there after 9 o'clock, so it was right at midnight, closing on midnight when they came up. These guys were exhausted. The younger guy was like this, like a surgeon. He was wearing gloves, and I couldn't, thankfully he was wearing a dark sweatshirt, so it was just glistening and wet. I couldn't really see much beyond that, but he said, can I use your sink to wash up? He looked like he was in pain. He took it off and he came back, and then he explained to me that you know, everything had come out effectively, right down his gloves and everywhere, and so he was a mess. So anyway, they wanted to settle up. he went out to get the thing, brought it back in, to write up the bill and all. And I'm still like freaking out, like, okay, if these guys have it, they've been, how many houses have they been, right? All these people, we have coronavirus, we're going to have it now. We just wasted a month of sheltering in place. I can't protect my family. And now I'm going to have to sit here in, uncertainty for the next few weeks, wondering if we've got it. At least we could flush the toilets. So that was a plus. But when this guy came back in, then he had his clipboard and he actually came in still with the wet sweatshirt, puts it down on my dining room table, stands over it saying, mind if I just fill this out here? And I thought about objecting, but then I realized, I couldn't say anything to this guy, right? I couldn't say anything. He had more moral authority than perhaps anybody I've encountered, because here I am worried about my family and their well-being. This guy has been in and out of people's homes nonstop for 2 weeks, 14 hours a day, going towards the most germ-filled areas that people have. So he was taking that home to his family every night. He was putting them at risk. He was doing all of this to protect me. So I knew in that moment 2 things. One is that it didn't matter what he was making; it wasn't nearly enough, and that B, he has more moral authority than I could ever have. So anyway, I try to be a bit spiritual. So I turned it over there, said a little prayer. I try to practice humility in my life as much as I can. And this actually was probably one of the easiest times that it ever was for me to practice humility, because if you have never done this before, I will tell you that nothing, absolutely nothing I've done in my life engenders more humility than standing in your dining room at midnight, handing your visa to a man covered in your shit. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Paul.
Sorry about that.
5 kids from age 5 to 19, I believe, all in the house.
All here.
With
Happy times.
Boomers getting coronavirus from every house in Wilmette all over the North Shore. That was great. Okay, our last teller is a Lake Forest resident. I saw her bring the house down at the Truth Be Told last year with a story about taking the SAT in her 50s, brought the house down, and she comes to storytelling from creative nonfiction, and I can't wait to hear her story. Everybody welcome Bobby Brown.
Thank you, Anne. Glad to be here. So this story starts when our son is in 6th grade, and this was the night of his first dance. And I had eagerly taken on the job of being the carpool mom because I thought that a captive audience of the car provided I could use to ask some probing questions to our son Ned. He had really kept his social life quite hidden to us. And I thought, okay, now he can't escape. He's in the car. And the plan was to pick up his friend Chris on the way. So I knew I had about 10 minutes of one-on-one time. And I wanted to use it to my best advantage. So I started out, conversationally. I said, now, Ned, tell me, what's the system at these dances now? Do the boys ask the girls to dance? Do the girls ask the boys? Maybe people just dance in a big group. What is the system? And Ned goes, well, I don't know. I said, when I was your age, we actually had dancing school. We had a teacher teaching us dances like the waltz and the foxtrot. And Ned goes, dances have names? I said, yes. And I even had to wear white gloves. And there was a woman who played the piano to provide the music. We didn't even have any records or anything. And then Ned said, what's a record? So I said, okay, here's the point. If the system is the same and the boys ask the girls to dance, do you think that you're going to be asking any girls to dance? Well, I don't know, maybe. So then I pressed ahead and I said, it might be nice if you see a girl who looks like she wants to dance and the system is that the boys ask the girls. Maybe she's standing at the edge of the dance floor. Why don't you just go up and ask her to dance? And there's complete silence. And Ned turned to me and he said, do you mean that you want me to dance with a loser? And there it was, the enduring stigma that has lasted for generations and across cultures. And I was thinking, oh my God, in this day and age, it's probably easier than ever to be called a loser. If you're just like one standard deviation away from the median, you could be categorized that way. There's so many parameters that would qualify you: your height, your weight, your complexion, the car your parents drive, and maybe even what your older sibling is like. And I do think that the blowback from an older sibling is particularly cruel. And then I thought, oh my God, I've just been handed it. Here is a perfect teachable moment. And the next words that I say could have a lasting impact on my son's life. I could teach him about diversity and acceptance and kindness. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this in the small amount of time that I have here? And then I remember thinking, oh my goodness, Ned said that he didn't want to dance with a loser. So I think that means that he has a toehold on some sort of social hierarchy. He doesn't think he's a loser. And I thought, oh goodness, this will make my job so much easier. I don't have to manage the anguish of an outsider, but I can talk to Ned as an insider and try and teach him about widening his circle to include more people. So how was I going to do this? And I knew that for an effective teachable moment, I had to make it his. I couldn't just dictate and tell him. I had to weave a story and create a logic train that he could tap into and then make it his own. So I started off by saying, you know, Ned, when I was your age, people might have thought that I was a bit of a loser myself. You know, I would have appreciated if someone had asked me to dance. And another silence, and then looked at me, and Ned looked at me with just a stricken look on his face. Mom, you were a loser? He was just devastated by this admission. And I think he was realizing that half of his genetic material was derived from a self-confessed loser. And then I started thinking to myself, wait a minute, what was I like in 6th grade? I mean, really, maybe I didn't like dances so much, but I had other things going on for me. But to tell you the truth, even after some 45 years, to apply that label to myself made me feel a little uncomfortable. And then I thought about my dancing school experience, and it was a high-stakes affair. The boys sat on one side, the girls sat on the other, and the boys could kind of eye the talent pool there and decide who they're going to choose to dance. And so the levels of humiliation from bad to worse were, number one, no one would ask you to dance. No, I'm sorry. Number one was a loser would ask you to dance. And here you can see that loser was not a gender-specific term. They were boys that would qualify. Number two, then no one would ask you to dance. And number three, that you'd be one of the extra girls. And in our grade, there were many more girls than boys. And so what the teacher, Mrs. Wilson, had done is told the extra girls, and that's what she called us, that we could dance together with the taller girl subbing in for the boy. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to get myself out of this hole that I dug myself into? And Ned said, you're right. You said you're a loser. Well, how long were you a loser? How long were you a loser for? And then suddenly I thought, oh, this is great. He's using the past tense here. I was a loser. So that must mean that this isn't a permanent situation, that you can outgrow it, that you can move from one category to another. And then Ned said, did Dad save you from being a loser? And I thought, oh, wow. Now we're getting into some sort of complex gender roles here. Does Ned think that it's the job of the man to save the woman from herself? I didn't really know how to react to that, except to think, well, at least Ned's got a pretty good image of his father. And we're getting close to Chris's house, and I knew I really had to step it up here and bring this around and try and right the ship here and make something positive out of this. So I said, Ned, yes, I will admit it, that in 6th grade, I didn't like dances. And so based on that yardstick, some people might have thought that I was a loser. But I had other interests. I had other things that I was good at, and I had a good time. And I just want you to know that it's the differences that make people interesting and what makes life interesting. You know that, don't you? And at this point, we had arrived at Chris's house. He started to get out of the car. He hadn't told me, he hadn't said anything yet. So I gave it one last salvo as he's headed up the walk to Chris's house. Ned, your father and I both think that we're the best thing that ever happened to each other. And still Ned didn't say anything. And I thought, oh my God, I've blown it. I had a chance. I had a big teachable moment here and I failed. And in fact, I could have scarred him for life. So I followed him up the walk and he walked into Chris's front hall and I heard him say loudly so that the entire household could hear, "You won't believe it. My mother was a loser, but it really didn't matter." I thought, not bad for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Bobby, that was so charming. You know, I had Mrs. Woolison for dance here. We did the foxtrot. We did, I can't remember, but I just remember dancing with incredibly large boys and then the girls dancing together too.
Oh no, we didn't have the opportunity. Girls did not dance with boys. We had to wear white gloves and little bobby socks.
I wore the bobby socks.
Yeah, I
wore the bobby socks. Well, anyway, that's our program, Stand and Deliver Virtual #2. I'd like to thank, first of all, Gorton Community Center, the gem of Lake Forest, Amy Wagliardo and Ann Wildman, always the most wonderful people to work with. I want to thank all the tellers, Sarah Bunger, everyone can unmute themselves, Sarah Bunger, John Costas, Jeff Baltes, Karen Evans, Paul Trainor, and Bobby Brown.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. And stay safe in the pandemic. Don't watch the news. Keep laughing and keep tuning into Gorton, guys. Thank you so much. I'm Anne Purky, and so good to be here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gorton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.